Some men come home to find the porch light on and dinner in the oven. I came home early from a business trip to find my 7-year-old grandson locked outside on the back porch in November, in his pajamas, no shoes, lips going blue, while my daughter-in-law sat inside watching television with the volume up loud enough that she said she never heard him knocking. Let me back up. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 63 years old, and until 18 months ago I was a claims investigator for Midwest Mutual Insurance, 31 years in the field before I retired. What that means in plain English is I spent 3 decades sitting across from people who were lying to me, sometimes about small things, sometimes about things that could put them in prison, and learning to tell the difference between a person who was scared and a person who was performing being scared. I was good at it. Good enough that they kept me on 2 years past when I could have walked away with full benefits, because nobody in that office could read a claim file the way I could. Funny thing is, all those years of catching liars for a living, and I still didn't see the one standing in my own son's kitchen. Welcome back, if you've been here before. If you haven't, settle in, because this one's going to take a minute, and I think you'll want to hear all of it. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I read everyone. I live in a town called Fairhope, just outside Dayton, Ohio. My late wife Carol and I bought a little brick ranch there in 1994, and I never left it, even after the cancer took her 4 years ago. My son Michael lives 20 minutes from me, out on the east side, in a 2-story with a good yard that Carol used to say looked like something out of a magazine. Michael's a good boy. Was a good boy, he's 34 now. An operations manager for a trucking logistics company, works long hours, travels some himself. His wife, my grandson's mother, died when the boy was 3. Car accident on Route 4 in the rain. Her name was Diane, and I still can't say it without something catching in my chest, because she was the kind of daughter-in-law you don't expect to get lucky enough to have, and then you lose her, and you watch your son try to rebuild a life out of the pieces. My grandson is named Cole, he's 7 now. He used to have this thing where he'd line up his dinosaurs on the windowsill by size, smallest to largest, and get genuinely upset if you moved one out of order. He calls me Grandpa Walt, and for the 4 years after Diane died, before Michael remarried, Cole and I were close in a particular way, the way you get close to a kid when you're one of the steady things in his life and he knows it. Then Renata came along. Michael met her at a company holiday party, of all places. She worked in HR for a different division, always put together, always smiling, always seemed to know exactly the right thing to say. First time I met her, she brought a casserole to Sunday dinner and complimented Carol's china cabinet. Carol had been gone 2 years by then, but I still kept the cabinet exactly as she'd left it and told me she could tell this was a house full of love. I remember thinking, well, isn't that nice? I remember thinking a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. They got married about a year later. I told myself Cole needed a mother figure. I told myself Michael needed somebody in his corner after everything he'd been through. I told myself that after 31 years of catching people in lies for a living, I certainly would have noticed if something was off with the woman raising my grandson. I told myself a lot of things. Here's what 3 decades of insurance investigation teaches you about people who are hiding something. They almost never slip up in the big, obvious ways you'd expect. They don't confess. They don't crack under pressure the way it happens in movies. The lies are small and boring and they accumulate, and unless you're specifically looking for the pattern, you just see a life going on as normal. Everything on the surface at Michael and Renata's house looked fine, better than fine. Renata posted family pictures on Facebook with captions about blessings and gratitude. She sent me pictures of Cole at his soccer games. She always remembered my birthday before Michael did. I was in Louisville in September, staying over for a claims conference, when Cole's 2nd-grade teacher, a Mrs. Petrosky, called my son directly because she couldn't reach Renata, and left a voicemail saying Cole had come to school twice that month without a jacket in cold weather and had fallen asleep at his desk both times, and asked if everything was all right at home. Michael played me the voicemail over the phone that night, sounding worried, and I told him, probably just a rough patch, kids go through phases, don't read too much into one teacher's phone call. I believed what I was telling him. That's the part that still eats at me some nights. I was in Cincinnati in October when Michael texted me that Cole had gotten a bruise on his arm at gym class, and Renata had already taken him to urgent care. And it was nothing. just an active kid being an active kid. I believed that too. I was so busy believing things that I stopped doing the one thing I'd built an entire career on. I stopped looking at the pattern. It was a Thursday in early November when my flight back from a follow-up conference in Indianapolis got canceled and rebooked 2 days early. I hadn't told anybody I was coming back sooner. I figured I'd surprise Cole, who'd been begging me for months to get him a puppy, so I stopped at a pet store, off I-70, and bought him a stuffed beagle that made a little barking noise when you squeezed its paw. Because a real dog was still a conversation Michael and Renata hadn't finished having. It felt like a poor substitute even as I was buying it. He would have loved a real one. I pulled into their driveway around 9:40 at night. The house was lit up warm and normal from the street, television glow flickering blue against the living room curtains. Good, I thought. Ordinary Thursday night. I didn't call ahead, wanted to see his face when I knocked. I came around the side of the house toward the front door, the way I always did, cutting across the driveway past the attached garage, and that's when I heard it, crying. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a kid who skinned his knee. Small, exhausted crying. The kind that's been going on so long, the kid doesn't have the energy left to make it loud anymore. The back porch light wasn't even on. It took me a second in the dark to see him, Cole, sitting on the top step in his pajamas, no shoes, no jacket, knees pulled up to his chest, shivering hard enough that I could see it from the driveway. It was 38 degrees that night. I remember because I'd checked the weather app on the drive over, thinking about whether I needed a coat to walk from the car. I dropped the stuffed beagle in the driveway, and I don't fully remember crossing the yard. I just remember being on my knees on that cold concrete step with my grandson in my arms, and his skin was like ice, and he was saying Grandpa over and over in this small cracked voice like he couldn't believe it was really me. Cole. Cole, baby, what happened? Why are you out here? He couldn't get the words out right away, just shaking, and I pulled my coat off and wrapped it around him and pounded on the back door. Renata opened it in her robe, phone in her hand, and behind her the television was still going, some home renovation show at a volume loud enough to explain, maybe, why a grown woman wouldn't hear a 7-year-old crying 20 feet from her own back door. She looked at me, then down at Cole in my arms, and her face did something strange, not shock, not the scramble of someone caught off guard. Something more like recalculating. Oh my gosh, Walter, I didn't know you were coming. He was being defiant about brushing his teeth, so I told him he could sit outside and think about it. I had no idea it had been that long. I was watching my show and lost track. He's been out here shivering in 38 degrees in his pajamas. I know. I feel terrible. I really do. But Cole can be so dramatic about. I looked at my grandson. Then I looked at her. Something in my chest did something I hadn't felt since the day the doctor told me about Carol's diagnosis, a kind of cold, total clarity, the exact opposite of panic. He's not being dramatic, I said. His lips are blue. I carried him inside myself, past her, and sat him on the kitchen counter under the light, and that's when I saw the bruise on his upper arm, yellow-green at the edges, older than any gym class injury has business being, and a second one starting fresh on his shin. I didn't say anything about it right then. I just started running warm water in the kitchen sink and had him put his hands under it, the way Carol used to do for me when we were first married and I'd come in off the farm in January with my fingers half frozen. Michael got home at 10:15. He'd been at a late meeting downtown, had no idea, and when he walked into that kitchen and saw his son wrapped in a towel on the counter, shaking, with his father standing over him with a face like stone, I watched something break open in him too. He asked what happened, and Renata started right in on the story about defiance and losing track of time and her long day, and I watched my son's face do the thing I'd seen 1,000 times across a claims desk, the face of a man who wants very badly to believe the version being told to him, because the alternative is unbearable. I didn't argue with her that night. 31 years taught me that too. You don't confront a liar the moment you catch the first thread. You pull it slowly, in private, until the whole thing comes apart in your hands instead of hers. Cole was checked out fine, physically. Once he'd warmed up, no lasting harm from the cold, thank God. Though the pediatrician on call the next morning noted the bruises and asked some careful questions, Renata answered a beat too smoothly. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my son's guest room with my laptop, and I did the thing I should have been doing for a year. I started pulling records. See, here's something people don't know about how insurance and medical systems talk to each other, or don't. As Cole's grandfather, I wasn't on his medical accounts. But I was still listed, from years back, as a secondary emergency contact on the family's insurance policy, a holdover from when Michael set it up right after Diane died and hadn't thought to update it. That gave me enough access, with one phone call to a customer service line, and 31 years of knowing exactly which questions to ask a claims rep, to see something I don't think Renata ever imagined anyone would look at. A list of urgent care visits, 4 of them in 14 months. Every single one on a day Michael's calendar, which I also had access to from years of helping him plan family trips, showed him traveling for work. A sprained wrist in June, a fall resulting in stitches above the eyebrow in August, the bruise from gym class in October, and one in February. I hadn't even known about a diagnosis of mild dehydration and exhaustion, logged at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, the same week Cole's teacher had first called about him falling asleep at his desk. I sat there at 2 a.m. in my son's guest room with the laptop light the only thing in the room, and I felt something I recognized from my working life, that specific, sick, focused feeling you get when a claim you'd assumed was routine turns out to be the tip of something much bigger. Line by line, a pattern I should have caught 6 months earlier laid itself out in front of me. My son's overtime, his business trips. The very things that were supposed to be building a good life for his boy had been the exact windows Renata used to do whatever she'd been doing to him. I didn't wake Michael up that night. I made a decision instead. The same kind of decision I used to make before walking into a room to deny a fraudulent claim. You don't show your hand until every piece is documented, dated, and impossible to argue with. You blow up the room too early. All you get is a defensive person with a good lawyer and time to get their story straight. You wait, you build the file, and then you put it on the table all at once. At 6 a.m. I called my old colleague from the claims office, a woman named Priscilla Odom who'd moved over to a role doing exactly this kind of documentation work for a family law firm in Dayton after she retired from insurance. I told her I needed everything laid out properly, how to request the full urgent care history formally, how to get a caseworker involved the right way, what a judge in Montgomery County would actually want to see. She told me to come in at 9. I called Michael's cell at 6:30. He picked up on the first ring. He hadn't slept either. "Dad, I need to talk to Cole. Alone. This morning, before she's up. I already know what you're going to say. Then you already know what we have to do." Cole was awake, curled up in the guest bed with me, still wearing my old flannel shirt because it was the warmest thing in reach the night before. I sat with him, and I did what I know how to do. I asked easy questions, quiet ones, the way you get a scared claimant to open up without spooking them. Not, "Did she hurt you?" which a kid that age will just say no to out of fear or loyalty or confusion. Just, "Bug, when Dad's away for work, what's it usually like at the house?" He got very still, the way kids do when they're deciding whether the truth is allowed. Then, in this small voice, "She gets really mad when Dad's gone. She says I'm too much to handle by herself. Sometimes she puts me outside, so I'll be quiet. She says I have to stay out there till I learn my lesson." "How long does she usually keep you out there, Bug?" "Until it's dark. Sometimes after." He picked at a thread on the blanket. "One time I knocked and she didn't come. I fell asleep on the step once. I didn't tell Dad 'cause she said if I told, things would get worse." The room went very quiet. I have interviewed grown men who'd committed insurance fraud who couldn't have delivered a more devastating statement with more composure than my 7-year-old grandson did right then, picking at a thread on a quilt, worried he was going to get in trouble for telling the truth. "You didn't do anything wrong, Cole. Not one thing. You hear me?" He nodded, watching me the way kids watch adults when they're trying to figure out if this is the moment everything finally gets fixed, or one more time an adult says the right words and nothing changes. "I've got you now, Bug. I promise you that." Michael sat outside the door and heard all of it. I watched my son's face go through something I hadn't seen since we buried Diane. Grief, but a sharper kind, grief with rage woven all through it. We went to Priscilla's office at 9. She walked us through exactly what we needed: a formal report to Montgomery County Children's Services, The medical records request done properly this time through Michael as the legal parent, a written, dated account of everything Cole had told us, and contact with a family law attorney experienced in emergency custody matters. She gave us a name, Deborah Klein, downtown Dayton, handled exactly these cases for 18 years. Deborah Klein's office was clean and quiet, nothing extra on the desk, and she read through everything we'd assembled without a word for what felt like a long time. When she finally looked up, she said, "Mr. Briggs, in 18 years I've seen a lot of documentation. This is about as thorough as I've seen a family put together in 12 hours. I spent 31 years reading files for a living," I told her. "I know what one's supposed to look like when it's real." With this, and a corroborated statement from the child, and pediatric records showing a pattern of injuries inconsistent with the explanations, given we can have an emergency ex parte order in front of a judge by end of day. That removes her from the home and suspends contact pending a full investigation. Today, Michael said. Today. Children's Services called Michael at 1:40 that afternoon to say the order had been signed. A caseworker and 2 officers would go to serve it that evening and asked if we knew where Renata currently was, since they preferred not to serve it at the house with Cole present. I did know. Renata had a standing Thursday routine every week. Without fail, she met 3 other women from the neighborhood for happy hour at a restaurant called the Winking Owl on Far Hills Avenue, 5 o'clock reservation, same corner table, and she'd posted about it on Facebook so many times over the past year I could have drawn a map. She'd already texted Michael that morning, cheerful as anything. "Heading to the Owl with the girls at 5. Hope Cole's doing better. Love you both." Heart emoji. He hadn't answered her. "She'll be there," I told the caseworker. The Winking Owl. Corner table by the window. I want to tell you I felt something like triumph standing in my son's kitchen at 4:45 that afternoon waiting to hear how it went. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the same hollow, wrung-out exhaustion I used to feel after closing a big fraud case, not joy, just the specific tiredness of a thing finally being handled the way it should have been handled from the start. The caseworker called Michael at 5:20. 2 officers had walked into the Winking Owl at 5 to 12, found Renata mid-conversation with her wine glass halfway to her mouth, and placed the order and an accompanying report on the white tablecloth in front of her, right next to the bread basket. Her 3 friends went dead silent. She'd tried the reasonable voice, the composed voice, the one that had apparently worked on teachers and doctors, and a trusting husband for over a year. "This is a misunderstanding. My husband doesn't have the full picture," and the officer had told her, plainly, that the picture was actually quite complete, and asked her to come with them. She'd looked around the restaurant, the caseworker said, like she was calculating an exit that didn't exist. Not one of her friends said a word in her defense. Not one stood up. We changed the locks at 6 p.m. Michael canceled her access to every joint account by 6:30. By the time Cole got home from staying with a neighbor that afternoon, her belongings were boxed, and the house felt, in some way I can't fully explain, like it had exhaled for the first time in over a year. "It smells different," Cole said, standing in the front hall, looking around like he was checking the air itself. "Good different?" Michael asked him. Cole thought about it hard, the way he used to think about which dinosaur went where on the windowsill. "Yeah, good different. We ordered pizza from the place on Wilmington Pike that Diane used to love, extra cheese, because some traditions are worth keeping even when the person who started them isn't here to enjoy it anymore. We ate it sitting on the living room floor, and Cole wanted to watch a documentary about wolves, and none of us objected. He fell asleep against my son's shoulder around 8:30, real sleep, deep and easy, a boy who for one night at least had absolutely nothing left to be afraid of inside his own house. I picked the stuffed beagle up off the driveway on my way out that night. I'd forgotten it was even there, dropped in the grass the moment I heard Cole crying. I brought it inside and set it on the arm of the couch next to him and squeezed its paw once so it gave that soft little bark, and Cole stirred just enough to smile without fully waking, and I thought, well, that'll do for now. A real dog can wait. He's got what actually matters. Renata was charged with child endangerment 3 weeks later, and I understand from Deborah Klein that given the documented pattern, the urgent care visits, the pediatric findings, Cole's own statement, and, as it turned out, a neighbor who was willing to testify she'd seen Cole locked outside on at least one other occasion months earlier, and hadn't known who to tell the county, is not inclined to go easy. The full custody proceedings are still moving through the courts, but the protective order stands, and it isn't going anywhere. I think about all those years I spent across a table from people, listening for the small hitch in their voice that told me they were lying about something that mattered. I built a whole career on the idea that if you pay close enough attention, people will always show you the truth eventually, whether they mean to or not. I just never thought I'd need those particular skills inside my own family. Looking at a woman who brought casseroles and complimented Carol's china cabinet and told me, the very first time we met, that she could tell this was a house full of love. She wasn't entirely wrong about that, as it turns out. It was a house full of love. She just wasn't the one who put it there. And in the end, she wasn't the one who got to keep living in it. Cole still lines his dinosaurs up on the windowsill, smallest to largest, and gets upset if you move one out of order. Some Thursday evenings now, instead of anybody sitting in a restaurant on Far Hills Avenue performing a life for an audience of friends who'd stay silent when it mattered most, my son and my grandson come over to my little brick house, and we eat dinner at Carol's old table, and Cole tells me about school, and I listen the way I used to listen for a lie, except now I'm just listening for him. That's the whole job now. That's the only claim file I care about closing. If this one got to you, hit that like button, leave me a comment, and tell me where you're watching from tonight, and I'll see you the next time I've got a story worth telling.